Americans are not prepared for an economic collapse. And even myself, I may not be as prepared as I need to be prepared, depending on how bad this economic downturn is going to get. Hey, everybody, it's Wednesday, March 10th, 2021. My name is JJ, watching Bull, Boom, Bear, Bust. Today, we're going to talk about population trends in the United States. And is that a sign or a canary in the coal mine that something bad is ahead of us? We're also going to talk about some of the worst places to be and the worst states to be living in during these times, and the shocking, in my opinion, very shocking number of people that live in metropolitan areas and around large cities. Let's go ahead and get started. Let's start here with the shot of the current U.S. population. We're at 332,355,479. This is worldmeters.info. Now, of course, this is not exactly right. Oh, hey, somebody was just born. Woo, woo, woo. Celebrate. I bet this is not completely accurate. Of course, there's a baby somewhere being born in a shack out in the woods somewhere that's not being tracked. I can guarantee that. But this is the most updated one that I could find, and it does look to be pretty close to compared to some of the other ones that I've seen. Okay, before we're done today, later in this report, we're going to also do an updated stimulus check calculator to show you, based on this current population, how much that people should have or could have gotten if all of the $1.9 trillion stimulus would have went straight to the American people. But first of all, what typically happens when the economy gets hard for many people and when people start falling further and further behind is people will reduce the number of babies that they, let's say, put out. The birth rate drops. All right, now we just did a report a couple days ago about someone that was being evicted, and the landlord illegally tried to evict this person by sending a cop to the house without any legal paperwork. All right, and this woman was pregnant, about 7 or 8 months pregnant, meaning she got pregnant during the shutdown, during the virus shutdowns. In my opinion, not a good idea unless you're just looking for a bigger paycheck, bigger handouts. So yes, people still give birth during hard economic times, especially when they're incentivized. But even with the incentives of having kids to get more handouts, population growth still drops or slows down in economic hard times, and especially before big recessions or Great Depressions. And then it really slows down and declines during the Great Depression or recession. Okay, with that said, let's scroll down to the US population growth. And this goes all the way up to early 2021 here. And what do we see? We see that it has been dropping off steadily. It boomed in the 60s, that was the baby boom. And we see it drop down to about 1%. And these are year-over-year numbers, year-over-year growth. So let's see what's been happening. Well, in the 90s, going into the late 90s, we saw a bit of an uptick and then a drop after the 2000 dot-com bubble went bust. And we see it kind of went steady here in the mid-2000s, leading up to 2010. We've been declining ever since. So after the financial crisis, if we've been in this excellent economic recovery, then why is the population dropping so much? Right? So this is not a fail-proof method of indicating how the economy is doing. But in general, if you're smart anyways, you're going to have less kids when you have less money, when you have less disposable income. And we know that debt is continuing to grow. But it's interesting to note, in my opinion, with the wealth effect that we saw in the lead up to the bursting of the housing bubble, we saw the population growth increase. But even with the latest run up in home prices and the big economic bubble that was blown by the money printers, we still see a dropping birth rate. So more people are realizing that, hey, having a family is expensive. And when prices continue to rise, when we continue to see inflation, it's probably not a good idea to have a big family to feed when prices continue to skyrocket and outpace the average income. Now, why do I say and continue to say that the US population for the most part, is not prepared for an economic collapse or even an economic downturn. Well, we have more people than ever dependent on handouts and rescue programs from the money printers, and less people than ever, the lowest amount of people of all time, are self-sufficient. And I've used this a few times during my reporting here on this channel, that if you compare ourselves now, the United States, to the Great Depression, people were more prepared back in the Great Depression more than they are now. Yes, there were soup lines and food lines, just like there's food lines now, except instead of people waiting around the block or around the corner on a sidewalk, now you have miles and miles of cars, and in some cases even new cars, where people have taken out 6 and 7 year loans to get into those cars, waiting in food lines, brand new cars waiting in food lines in many cases. But the point I want to get to is the percentage of the population that lives in more populated, dense metropolitan areas. Let's scroll down a little bit here. This is still worldmeters.info. Almost 83% of the US population is urban. Urban, 83%. And this is pretty recent, as of 2020. So over 273 million people live in urban areas. These are the people that are stacked in apartments and high rises and living elbow to elbow, in many cases living like sardines, in housing complexes, condos, townhomes, and apartments. Right? So almost 274 million out of the population of 332 million. Pretty staggering, right? Well, the way that this US economy has been run is that most jobs now are near more populated areas, large cities. And the days of living off the land or living out in the country and not having to rely on handouts or working for some large corporation, those days are almost completely gone. It can still be done, but when you have the enormous property taxes like you have now, with the run up in land values, you're going to see a lot more difficult times in trying to be self-sufficient and living out far away from the city population. Now, let's just real briefly analyze why most jobs are around bigger cities and more populated areas. Well, that's because we're a consumer nation. So where there's more people, there's going to be more jobs, because where people congregate, people spend money. And that leads us to our current service sector economy, where over 70% of jobs are service sector. Waiters, cashier, retail. Where if you go back to the 1930s in the Great Depression area, right, more people farmed and more people produced. So not as many people, not as big of a percent of the population, had to be living near cities or in heavily populated areas. Now, still on the topic of stimulus checks and handouts, let's take a look at a recent Wall Street Journal article, What is in the Third Stimulus Package? And it gives us a nice chart here that visually gives us a look at the percentage of the paycheck, or the portion of the payouts of the $1.9 trillion bill that went to the American people. And from this article, we get a nice visual on the size of the stimulus bills. And we go back to the first one at the beginning of the shutdown there, 1.7 trillion, March 2020. December 2020, 915 billion. And here the current one in March, 1.9 trillion. And if we scroll down, we see this box right here represents the overall stimulus bill, the portion of it that is the stimulus checks, and it's only about 410 billion out of the 1.9 trillion, with the $1,400 per person. So you could see, as this visual lays out here, that this bill really could have went to help the people a lot more than it did. All right, now let's run the numbers again on how much every American could have gotten, because I did that in my last video, maybe it was 2 videos ago, and some people were questioning it because I typed in the numbers pretty quickly on the calculator, and some of the zeros didn't show up on the screen before I hit enter. While the calculation still registered, I don't think there's a few people that question, the math on it. All right, so let's go over again to the total US population, 332 million, and let's go ahead and put 1.9 trillion into the calculator. So here you have it, millions, billions, and 1 trillion, 1.9. The amount of the latest stimulus package. Now let's divide it by this number right here. I'm going to do it really slowly so no one questions this. 332,355,546 equals, each American could have gotten over $5,700 in the stimulus check. That's every man, woman, and child. And if you look at just the US taxpayer and the population total, it could have been closer to $13,000 each person could have gotten from that stimulus package. Right, so America, the land of the free, we the people have become now just beggars hoping for the money printers to throw us some crumbs, while the people at the top, closest to the money printers, they get the money first and decides who gets the trickle down or the crumbs from the king's table. I'm going to wrap this one up here, everybody. Thanks for watching this report. Hope everybody's doing well. I'm not going to say smash that like button because everybody says that on YouTube. But if you like this channel, if you'd like to support us, the best thing you can do is subscribe and hit that notification bell and come back for more information here on the news regarding the economy, business, housing, money, preparation for hard financial times, and much, much more. I hope you're doing well at this time. Everybody stay well, stay safe, stay prepared. Bye for now. Peace.